Let's talk about the National Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. There has been a lot of buzz around this idea over the past couple of months, past 6 months. And the reason that there's so much buzz and excitement around the idea of a US National Bitcoin Reserve is because it could push the Bitcoin price a lot higher, which would make me happy and other Bitcoin holders very happy. In this video, we're gonna talk about why the US might want to create a national strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're gonna talk about what it can mean for the Bitcoin price and Bitcoin adoption moving forward. Exciting stuff. And we're gonna talk about why the US is probably going to have to create a national strategic Bitcoin reserve at some point, whether they want to or not. Before I get into the video, please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code for a $3 lightning tip down below. If you want to support the channel, feel free to send me a little lightning tip. I'd appreciate it. Now, is this national strategic Bitcoin reserve actually going to happen? According to the betting markets, it seems like it probably is. According to Polymarket, there's a 34% probability that there is a national strategic Bitcoin reserve within the first 100 days, and there is a 64% probability that it happens in 2025. So the betting people believe that this national Bitcoin reserve is going to happen for the US. Now, the question is, how does it happen? Is this going to be a public announcement? Is the US going to come out and say, hey, we are stacking Bitcoin? Or is it going to be something that the United States keeps on the low? And I'm kind of leaning towards that second option. I think if you are an entity and you're looking to acquire a scarce resource, then why tell the whole world? If the US were to come out, if Donald Trump came out yesterday in his inauguration and said, hey, we're going to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, I'm signing an executive order today, what would happen to the Bitcoin price? The Bitcoin price would shoot up a lot higher as other countries, other entities front run the US. So I think it's a lot smarter to acquire the Bitcoin in secret on the low, and then maybe you make an announcement at some point, but you've already acquired Bitcoin and you can push the price of your Bitcoin holdings higher rather than announcing it before you acquire the Bitcoin. That allows other people to front run you, and then you get Bitcoin at a higher price. Trump did sign many executive orders yesterday, and who knows, maybe Trump signed an executive order to have his crypto team start stacking some Bitcoin for the United States. Right now, Bitcoin is actually trending up right around $106,000. And when we see big moves in the Bitcoin price over the next 6 months or so, you have to think, could this be a nation state like the United States stacking Bitcoin or someone else? We saw Donald Trump attend the Bitcoin conference in 2024, and he announced that he wanted to make the Bitcoin that the US already holds, which the US acquired through confiscation, he wants to make that Bitcoin part of the national strategic Bitcoin stockpile. So he used a different word there, but he said that he doesn't want to sell any of that Bitcoin. He didn't mention creating an additional reserve, adding more Bitcoin. That's more something that's being pushed by other people in government. He's being influenced a lot by these people. So I think that we probably will see the US start to acquire more Bitcoin at some point. And we know that with Bitcoin, first movers are rewarded. If you buy Bitcoin first, especially if you're a large entity that can move the price, you're going to see a reward for that. You're going to see your Bitcoin holdings head higher. So really for countries, it's all about moving first. The US already has 213,297 Bitcoin that they've acquired through confiscation. And if they start stacking more Bitcoin, that is going to give the US a huge economic advantage moving forward as they just watch the value of their Bitcoin holdings rise. One action that really pushed forward this idea of a national Bitcoin reserve forward is when Senator Cynthia Lummis introduced the Bitcoin Act of 2024 last year. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first visual here. And this kind of shows some of the ideas in the Bitcoin Act of 2024. And the two ideas on here that really kind of flick my interest are the Bitcoin purchase program. So according to this bill, the US would purchase 200K Bitcoin per year for 5 years until the US had acquired 1 million Bitcoin, and that would push the price of Bitcoin a lot higher. According to the Balance on Exchanges visual, which is a place where I really look to see where the Bitcoin price is going, you could check it out on CoinGlass. We've seen the balance on Bitcoin exchanges dwindling, and there's only a little over 2 million Bitcoin left on exchanges. So if the US were to try to acquire 1 million, think about what that could do to the price with supply and demand. So exciting stuff if this bill were to pass. Not sure if it will. The other thing I really like about this bill is it has an idea in there to protect self-custody for individuals like you and me, and protect our right to hold Bitcoin. And I think that's huge, because let's say the government does want to acquire a lot of Bitcoin and there isn't a lot of Bitcoin out there on exchanges. Could the government try to confiscate Bitcoin similar to like what they did with gold back in the day? Because these assets, these scarce sovereign assets really give people a lot of power. So I think that would be great if we could protect the individual's right to hold Bitcoin and self-custody Bitcoin. One of the ideas with the Bitcoin Act of 2024 is that it could help the US with their national debt situation. Now, I've stated on this channel many times that I think the US is screwed when it comes to this national debt situation. The US has over $36 trillion in national debt. But with that said, if there was a way to help the US out with their debt situation, stacking Bitcoin might be the way to do it, because Bitcoin is appreciating at a crazy rate. I believe that Bitcoin is going up something like 63% every year, and I actually have a visual that I found on River's website. I read a very helpful article on the National Strategic Bitcoin Reserve on there if you want to check it out. But this visual shows the growth of Bitcoin's appreciation compared to the US money supply, the dollar supply, and the S&P 500 every year. And as you can see, Bitcoin is appreciating at a much higher rate than the US money supply. So let's say the US were to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, and in their quest to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, this pushed the Bitcoin price up to $10 million per Bitcoin, which is totally possible. If countries come in and start buying up Bitcoin, we could see the price of Bitcoin head up a lot higher than most people think. And that's because Bitcoin has a truly limited supply. And the more it goes up, the less inclined people are going to be to sell it. If people see countries buying Bitcoin, they're going to want to hold on to that asset. So let's say that were to happen. The US acquires 1 million Bitcoin and the price goes up to $10 million per Bitcoin. That would mean that the United States Bitcoin holdings would be worth $10 trillion. Now, like I just said, the US has $36 trillion in debt. So even if the US was to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, this probably wouldn't solve the US debt problem, but it could help, right? If the US were to acquire a lot of Bitcoin and that Bitcoin rises in value, the same way it would help you or me economically, it could really help the United States, and it could help them better manage their debt situation it could restore confidence in the United States and their fiscal situation when you're looking at the global outlook. So I think it's a good idea if you want to be a country that is doing well economically. It probably makes sense to hold the asset that is going up the most at the fastest rate, like we just saw in that chart I showed you. Now let's talk about why the US is going to need to buy more Bitcoin sooner or later. And the reason they're going to need to buy more Bitcoin is because other countries are going to buy Bitcoin, and the US does not want to be in the back of the pack when it comes to this Bitcoin race. The reason that they are going to need to buy more Bitcoin is because of nation state game theory. Now, currently, the United States is holding, like I said, around 213,000 Bitcoin, and behind them, China holds 190,000 Bitcoin, and both countries have acquired that Bitcoin through confiscation. So the US is currently in the top of the pack, I believe. I couldn't see the amount of Bitcoin that Russia holds, so I'm not sure how much Bitcoin they have, but it seems like the US has more Bitcoin than any other country as of right now. But if other countries like China or Russia start to acquire a lot of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price shoots up and the US waits too long to buy Bitcoin and they can't get as much at a higher price, well, then that's going to give China, Russia, other countries an advantage over the US. The reason for why the US needs to stack Bitcoin is the same reason that all entities will eventually need to stack Bitcoin. Whether you're an individual, a business, or a country, if you don't buy Bitcoin, you are going to get left behind. As the whole world kind of adopts Bitcoin and sells out of fiat currencies, those entities who hold on to fiat currencies and don't buy into Bitcoin are going to get left behind. And this is something that I try to communicate to people, that it's probably safer to have a little bit of Bitcoin than none at all, because we are going to see this trend continue. Just go ahead and take a look at the dollar exchange rate with Bitcoin, and you could see that the dollar just continues to fall against Bitcoin over the past 15, 16 years. That's going to continue. And if you want to hold on to dollars, that's up to you. But I would recommend looking into that decision, because I think people who hold Bitcoin are going to do a lot better. When it comes to other countries reserving Bitcoin, I think that all countries are incentivized to do it. Just look at El Salvador, who started reserving Bitcoin a couple of years ago. They also made Bitcoin legal tender. This strategy has really paid off for them, and there's a huge first mover advantage. Like I said before, if you're one of these first countries to make a big Bitcoin purchase or multiple purchases, then you are going to see that pay off when other countries come in after you and buy up Bitcoin, and they push the price of your Bitcoin holdings higher. Some of the countries that I'm keeping an eye on are China and Russia. These are two very powerful adversaries to the US. And if a country like China were to acquire a lot more Bitcoin, this could force the US to buy more Bitcoin as well, as the US doesn't want China to have an economic advantage over them. We saw that Hong Kong proposed some legislation to introduce a national strategic Bitcoin reserve at the end of 2024. As for Russia, Russia is a powerful nation. I don't know how much Bitcoin they have, but if we see a huge jump in the Bitcoin price and we see that a large entity has purchased a lot of Bitcoin, the US could suspect that this is Russia and feel the need to acquire more Bitcoin themselves. I'm also looking at South American and African countries, really countries with weaker currencies, and thinking that maybe the governments there may look to stack Bitcoin to protect themselves economically. Argentina is a country that I'm keeping my eye on. We know that Javier Milei and Nayib Bukele are friends. Javier Milei is a libertarian, and Argentina may already be stacking Bitcoin, but that's definitely a country that I could see stacking Bitcoin soon if they aren't doing it already. I was looking around and I also saw that Switzerland and Czechia have proposed the idea of a Bitcoin reserve, and I'm sure there's some other countries out there who have also also proposed the idea and maybe I just missed it. And like I said, all countries are incentivized to stack Bitcoin, and I think that all countries will stack Bitcoin at one point or another. Another thing that we've seen recently is that a lot of US states are introducing legislation to create their own state reserves for Bitcoin. Some of these states include Wyoming, Texas, Oklahoma, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Hampshire, Utah, North Dakota, and Arizona, and I may have missed a couple, but you just have to think, if all these US states are stacking Bitcoin, I find it hard to believe that the federal government isn't going to stack Bitcoin as well, because if all the states start stacking Bitcoin, that's going to be pushing up the Bitcoin price for sure. Given that we're going to see more nations and states stacking Bitcoin over the next couple of years, I find it hard to believe that the United States is not going to stack Bitcoin themselves. And when the US starts stacking more Bitcoin, we are going to see that reflected in the Bitcoin price. So right now is really your opportunity as an individual to front run governments, to front run the US and get some Bitcoin before Bitcoin's price reaches a new level. So I suggest you take advantage, but again, up to you. Do your own research. That's gonna wrap it up for this video. I hope we see the US start stacking Bitcoin soon. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. I really appreciate your support, and I'm trying to have this channel booming in 2025. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.